Hi, and welcome to your reading. This is a pool of thought reading where I go in with a question and see where the reading unfolds. Today's question is, how do I foreshadow my shadow working against me? How do I foreshadow my shadow working against me? So it's like, all right, I know I have shadow. I can understand shadow work. I get the basic knowledge of what shadow is supposed to be, and now how can I prevent it to work against me, right? So, I mean, that's like saying, man, I know I get anxiety every time I go to work, but ultimately, how can I foreshadow that the next time I go to work, my anxiety of the shadow doesn't bother me? What can I do? Those are like the things to try to understand what that question is supposed to make one think or ponder on or about. Loosen your grip. Coping mechanisms, density, addiction, let God in. How do I foreshadow my shadow working against me? To not have so much control. Loosen your grip. Coping mechanisms is a reminder to understand that you do not perhaps have the right coping mechanisms. So learning different coping mechanisms will allow you to assess whether the shadow that has feelings and curiosities and wants to show up and play too has to offer for the said situation. And you'll be able to assess with some new coping mechanisms what you can do to satisfy the pressure that the shadow gives. Coping mechanism for me maybe showing up, having the anxiety of always showing up late, is to maybe wake up earlier than the time that you're waking up now, and to see if you can accomplish with adding more time to your awakening of the day, to see if it gives your shadow enough time to feel satisfied, to not bother you anymore on the pressure point of then leaving the house and heading for work. It is to learn how to have a relationship with identifying what your shadow is and then admitting it for yourself. In that way, the shadow loosens its grip on you, because now it realizes it does not control you, but you control it. Grief. I understand that losing something is an opportunity to appreciate it. Shadow is usually a side that likes to communicate in using the light that accesses the shadow, to see how the shadow can learn how to speak for itself. Because shadows cannot speak for themselves. If you are under the sun and you see your shadow, you don't see your shadow talking back to you. In your imagination, you may see your shadow talking back to you. And that's when the shadow has too much of a control on you. When you start realizing that the shadow is starting to talk back to you. So what would one do in that situation? Learn if that shadow has an identity. And if that identity is something that you are okay in living with, you welcome it into your life and you introduce it to the life that you have now to share with it, so that it learns how to integrate in a life that you actually want to have, and allowing the shadow to not have so much of a tight grip on you. Grief is taking the stake here, because for most of you, the shadow is loud because you are ignoring all your emotions. So the shadow is using the light of grief to trigger itself. So it wants to show you a good time, in thinking that every time you've made the shadow become aware that, let's say, an addiction is something that's supposed to give you happiness, well, the shadow only knows that as then your happiness. So it's going to think that, oh, it wants to remind you of an outing that you more or less may not already want to show up in. Your intuition says no, but you go because it's a obligation you verbally signed up for. And let's say your shadow pre-warned you of this because intuition said you don't want to go, but your ego said yes because your shadow was louder than your intuition. And you go and you drink, and then the next day you have a hangover, and this whole entire time you're dreading it. So now the hangover is worse because for the 7 days it took for your body to remind you that it didn't want to have that experience, it's now having the experience, and the only way it can let you know how terrible it is of an experience is to have it experienced by you as terribly as it feels. So how can you foreshadow your shadow working against you? Is knowing when you have an intuition of yes and no, to explore that yes and to see what questions need to be asked or answered for it to be a solid yes. The same thing how it could be a solid no, for you to show up 1,000% at things that you say that you want to show up to. I hope that made sense. Some of you are taking healing too serious at this time, which means if you're taking healing too serious at this time and you're doing all this love and light thing because love and light is just a nice little energy to tap into, and it feels great and it sounds lovely, and oh, look at the community. Yeah, let's not forget your shadow here. You need to do some shadow work here. Shadow work. If you don't know what shadow work is, then I can direct you to my shadow dance, timeless reading on my tarot playlist service. On my tarot playlist service, on my tarot service playlist that is on my YouTube channel. And you can browse there or explore other readers who may have readings to explain what shadow work is all about. But it would then benefit you to understand what shadow work is all about, to understand how your shadow can even irritate you in the first place. We have judgment here, and fuck me, we have the Tower card. So as far as understanding how the foreshadowing of the shadow takes place is to know that, well, there are certain patterns that you put to yourself in your life that only you will admit to yourself or not, that you actually put yourself in these patterns. And we're not talking about certain structures that you were born into. We're talking about the decisions you have reached for yourself in order to be in the current position that you are, in right now, that have to do with choices, whether it's the school that you chose to go to, or the work that you sign up for, the career path, or the family you decided to marry yourself into, or the kids you decided to end up actually having or saying yes to having, or whatever it is. There are structures to the baseline of what you won't admit, not even to me, what it is that you signed up for. And in not doing so, you're making yourself 1,000% vulnerable to the universe to do exactly whatever it wants to do, whatever she wants to do with you, because, well, it gets to do that with you. So since it gets to do whatever it wants to do with you, the baseline for it is to antagonize the shit out of you, as far as providing judgment and the Tower card, and then also the Emperor card here to say there is no control that you're going to have besides thinking you're in control. Thinking that you're in control is completely something that you are allowed to experience, because yes, your thoughts are your own, and ultimately only you can persuade your thoughts to venture in one degree or another. No one can persuade you to like something if the baseline is that you just won't like it. You can pretend all you want. You can keep coming back into the cycle of life and pretend all you want, but the baseline of raw truth would be between you and the connection of source, for which it is, like I said, majority of you will not agree. You won't admit it. I don't need you to. In the fact of whatever it is you won't admit, you're being foreshadowed into knowing certain responsibilities are up to you to know, and for up to you also to experience and to make the right judgment call. When you make the right judgment call for yourself, you'll understand what it makes to make right, you'll understand what it takes to make right judgment calls, and what it also means to have made them, to experience that journey, and to ultimately understand it's not about having full control at all times. It's to understand how to get back up when you feel that you have gotten too much control of something, or you wanted to have control of everything and it just wasn't working in your favor, and you couldn't maybe see that it wasn't working in your favor, but there's more or less something that came into your life to make you feel like this ain't it. And whatever that is, the universe is helping you out, and the way the universe is helping you out is sending its shadows through the work to irritate the shit out of you, which are your own shadows. So your own shadows will work with whatever you got that doesn't want to be ignored, and it will utilize whatever it has gotten from you before to kind of give it some playing field. And that playing field will run into certain addictions, involvements with people that are just not that healthy for you anymore, family that you think are important, but they're not family in regards to having that structure of the netting that you need to grow and evolve. There are no labels that you're tied to. All right, even the cord of the umbilical cord of your mother gets cut. So ultimately, the severance from where creation can be accountable for you is only to a certain degree, and as much as their philosophies on keeping that degree of sanity for yourself. No one can do it. No one can imbue their own judgments or their beliefs onto you. It can only be swayed by you. And doing so is also to kind of understand there are different ways to have the same conversation, and the different ways to have the same conversation shows up in you realizing that, well, I understand that losing something is an opportunity to appreciate it. We have the Queen of Swords and the High Priestess energy here. Queen of Swords is saying, universe is asking a lot of you at this time in this reading to understand what it means to be powerful in the words that you do choose to say. Even if there are certain words that come spewing out of your mouth where you're like, wait a minute, I don't even know where that came from. It came from somewhere, and you're tapping into that knowledge to understand where it comes from with the High Priestess here in the background. The High Priestess knows too much and doesn't do a lot. What she doesn't do is say everything that she knows. And that doesn't mean that she doesn't do a lot. It's just that she won't show up to the conversation of the mundane because, well, it's not her that needs to learn anything. It's the other people. And that's what you're learning, how to tap into that connection, even if it means to have to tap into connection with yourself to gain a better understanding of what the universe is asking of you at this time, to also understand what that question is how that question could be answered, and how to use your shadows to foreshadow it working against you. And some of that is to understand when the baseline of things that don't feel good and show up too much in your life, then that's what you need to look at, because you're saying you don't want it. So if you don't want it, what can you do in the situation to get away from it, or to not allow it to affect you anymore? And it's a fragile situation for most of us. And in the moments where we think we are so at loss and not knowing where to go, the universe judges us the most, because it wants you to understand you are never in a capsule, you're never bounded, and no one ever shackles you to wherever you are. We have the Ace of Wands followed by the Page of Cups. So taking the time to understand what you may need to take some time to understand what judgment of the universe is to mean for you at this time, what it means collectively and for yourself. It may benefit you to understand what shadow work is if you don't know, but some of you already know what shadow work is. That's why you're listening out to this message. And if you do know what shadow work is, then stop bypassing it, because that's what I'm seeing that you're doing. If you're bypassing shadow work, you're never going to be satisfied. You're going to continue your journey of getting whatever you claim you can do, because you can access that power of manifestation and get away with shit. You won't get away with shit with the Page of Swords, with the Page of Cups here and a little fish in the cup. You won't get away with it, because a little fish in the cup is the universe watching you. And your behavior and what it is that you learned, and how you're utilizing that learning process, because some of you are lying, and we're not saying it's bad to lie, but you're not utilizing the lie in the direction for the best of you. And since you're not using it for the best of you, well, then you're experiencing the lies unfolding of earth, and not the holiness of earth. Holiness of earth does not mean you ignore shadows. We have the Ten of Swords energy, overwhelming situations. Life is overwhelming. There's too many people that come in and betray you, too many obstacles that come in and totally they're exhausting for someone. Someone's running completely exhausted and tired. And that has a lot to do with self-infliction. This person just knows better and thinks that eating from the same poison is going to give them some sort of mystical powers. It's just really not. Someone here is doing some ritualistic work using energies that they can't trust for themselves, because they don't even trust the person that they're taking this ritualistic advice, and they're expecting that ritualistic advice to work for them, when the baseline of the intuition is saying you don't like the individual that you use this information from, so why are you using information, is what your higher selves are trying to say. So since you may not understand your definition or your own ingenuity of what it means to have a connection with your higher self, the shadows are here. Your shadows are here to say, well, we're going to call ourselves Itsy Bitsy Tiny, and Itsy wants something to say, Bitsy wants something to do, and Tiny has a lot of shit that she wants to bite. And there's, I don't know where that came up, but there are different things to the identity sectors of what you may or may not be paying attention to, and what it means to exist in a may or may not is to understand what is happening for you and what is not happening for you. And only you can generally come up with the discernment of that, because this is a general reading and not a personal one directed for you. I didn't do this for you. I didn't say, hey, come here and this is the outcome of the reading. This reading is out there and you're saying this reading is for me, and seeing what I can utilize from this reading. So please use that as a discretion of knowing that your shadows are also going to be triggered now to see, hey, what else can you get from life, knowing that now you know too much. And when you know too much of what it is that you can play with, how are you going to use it for your best advantages? Because right now the circles and the cycles that you have going on for yourself seem amazing, but you're just never satisfied here. And you see that the progression of life is going up, but then it goes down low really deeply, because you just don't have control over something. I think ultimately some of you don't have control of your esoteric connection here, hence why the shadows are all over the place. You're learning one thing and depicting the energy to be that, and then never addressing it back again, and then the universe is like, I'm not this energy that you labeled for me. The Ace of Pentacles here is saying, you know, when divine sees the eyes of you behaving in the behavior that you feel good in, when you take one step forward with the left and one step forward with the right, that you see your opportunities rise from the very moment your heels or whatever, however you're walking on this earth, to make this earth and yourself make sense. This is an opportunity for you to take as much time as you need, and to understand things will come in full circle for you to understand, but you have to experience the whole entire fucking cycle for it to make sense. And for some of you, it's taking a long time. And it's taking a long time because some of you, again, are lying. And if you're lying, you're never getting to the truth. And the longer you're never talking about the truth, you cannot expect something to change. Perseverance. I know that I can do whatever I set my mind to. I know that I can do whatever I set my mind to. Like I said, some of you have a really amazing connection with that, what we're going to call the invisible world here, because the invisible world is what makes sense to you. You're feeling it in either your body getting warm, feeling the sensations right now, and agreeing with me. And me calling you out, you're like, holy shit, right? Someone out there is feeling that. And if so, you are experiencing what it means to have accountability more so than the average Joe here, or Joe Schmo here, your neighbor, or anyone else, because you are sensing something that is unanimous, because you picking up on that energy most likely means that someone else can also pick up on that energy, and we may not be knowing each other. So if that's the case, there is a communicative thing going on that we're not going to ignore, and we cannot ignore that it exists. In that is what's giving you the clarity that I know what I can do, whatever I set my mind to. And it's also giving you the clarity of, I understand that losing something is an opportunity to appreciate it. Those two things are simultaneously working together at the same time. All right, I'm hearing that this is all that is to be said of this reading. I hope that you enjoyed the messages for whatever it is that you were looking for at this time. I do hope to connect further with you. If you're interested in reaching out to me, please do so, and checking out the description box below. And more or less just having a continuous flow of collective energy and allowing yourself to show up in the best way that we can. And with that being said, may you have a wonderful morning, noon, or night, wherever you are in the ether of this time and space. May you keep flowing, growing, and glowing. Take care. Bye.